The war was almost over. For centuries, the Dreadnought's dominion had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist. They had crushed countless species, conquered hundreds of planets, and erased entire civilizations. Now, their fleet hovered over Cyphos 9, a small rebel world that had dared to resist them. Admiral Chorus watched from the command deck of his massive warship, the Dreadfang. The planet below was already in ruins. Smoke rose from burning cities, and the last remnants of the resistance were being hunted down. Victory was certain. Yet, something felt wrong. "Commander Vec," Chorus growled. "Why am I getting strange energy readings from the planet's surface?" Vec, a thin reptilian officer, tapped furiously on his console. "Admiral, we are detecting powerful energy signatures deep underground. Unknown origin." Chorus narrowed his glowing red eyes. "Weapons? A hidden base?" Vec hesitated. "I don't think so, sir. These readings don't match any known rebel technology." Chorus frowned. He hated mysteries. "Send a scout team. I want answers now." On the surface of Cyphos 9, the Dreadnought scout team landed near the source of the strange energy. The ground was littered with debris, the remains of ancient battles. Captain Excel stepped out of the shuttle, his armor gleaming under the pale light. He scanned the surroundings. This place felt old. "Spread out," he ordered. "Find the source of the readings." The team moved carefully through the ruins. Strange metallic structures rose from the ground, half buried in dirt and rock. The air was thick with static energy, making their scanners flicker. Then one of the soldiers called out, "Captain, over here." Cell rushed to the spot. His eyes widened. Before him, a massive warship lay buried beneath the surface. Its dark metal hull was cracked but intact. Strange symbols, not of Dreadnought's origin, covered its surface. "This is no rebel ship," one of the soldiers whispered. Zell's communicator crackled. "Captain," Admiral Chorus's voice came through. "What have you found?" Zell hesitated. "Sir, I think we've discovered something ancient, something powerful." Chorus's voice sharpened. "Is it a threat?" Zell was about to answer when the ground shook violently. The buried ship groaned, its massive structure shifting. Dust and debris rained from above. The energy readings on their scanners spiked dangerously. Then, a deep mechanical voice rumbled from within the buried warship. "Human warship detected. Activating systems." Zell's blood ran cold. "Sir," he whispered into his communicator, "I think we just woke something up." Above, in orbit, alarms blared across the Dreadnought's fleet. The energy readings were now off the charts. Admiral Chorus clenched his fists. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded. "We may have just found something far more dangerous than rebels." Captain Cell's heart pounded as the ground rumbled beneath his feet. The buried warship, silent for centuries, was stirring. "Fall back," he ordered, but his voice was drowned out by a deafening metallic groan. A massive crack split the earth as the ancient warship began to rise. Dust and debris exploded into the air. The symbols on its hull glowed blue, and an eerie hum vibrated through the ground. Then a voice, deep, cold, and mechanical, echoed from the ship's speakers. "Human warship, designation, Titan's Wrath, reactivating." Zell's breath caught in his throat. Human. That was impossible. Humans were extinct. The Dreadnought's dominion had wiped them out centuries ago. Their homeworld had been destroyed. Their fleets had been annihilated. And yet, this ship was waking up. In orbit, the Dreadnought's fleet. Admiral Chorus watched from the command deck of the Dreadfang as his scanners went insane. "Sir," Commander Vec shouted, "the energy readings are rising exponentially." "That ship is." The buried warship launched into the sky. A shockwave blasted outward, sending chunks of earth and rock flying. The colossal vessel, covered in battle scars and alien dust, hovered above the planet, its engines glowing with a blue-white light. Then alarms blared. "All ships, brace for impact," a Dranox officer shouted. The human warship had just locked onto them. On the surface, the scouting team's nightmare. Cell and his team barely managed to stay on their feet as the warship ascended, leaving the deep crater where it had been buried. One of his soldiers gasped, staring at his scanner. "Captain, there's not just one ship." Cell looked down. His stomach dropped. The ground around them was cracking. More massive, ancient ships, dozens, began rising from beneath the planet's surface. The symbols on their hulls flared to life. Dust cascaded off their armored plating. The sleeping fleet was waking up, and they were angry. The first shot. Admiral Chorus made a split-second decision. "All ships, fire now." The Dranox fleet unleashed a barrage of plasma torpedoes and ion beams. The weapons streaked through space, racing toward the human warship. But before they could land, the ship's defense systems came online. A shimmering blue shield formed around Titan's Wrath, absorbing the attacks like they were nothing. The ship's glowing cannons turned toward the Dranox fleet. The deep mechanical voice spoke again. "Hostile forces detected. Engaging." Then, it fired. A single beam of blue-white energy erupted from the warship's main cannon. The Dreadfang shields collapsed instantly. A fraction of a second later, the Dranox flagship exploded, torn apart in a massive fireball. Admiral Chorus never even had time to scream. The remaining Dranox ships panicked. Their weapons were useless. Their most powerful flagship had been obliterated in seconds. And more human warships were still rising. On the surface, Captain Zell's horror. Zell fell to his knees, staring up at the sky. This wasn't just some old wreckage. This wasn't lost technology. This was a sleeping human armada, hidden for centuries. And now, it had returned. Vex's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, what do we do?" Zell had no answer. Because for the first time in Dranox history, they were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. The battlefield had changed in an instant. Where once the Dranox fleet had floated with absolute control, now chaos ruled. The ancient human warships, buried for centuries, had risen from their graves. Their dark hulls, scarred from forgotten battles, shimmered as power surged through them once more. The Titan's Wrath hovered at the center, its weapons locking onto the terrified Dranox forces. The space around Sifos 9 was no longer under Dranox rule. It belonged to humanity now. Captain Cell watched in horror as another Dranox warship disintegrated in a flash of blue-white energy. The human weapons were unlike anything he had ever seen. They didn't just destroy, they erased. The enemy fleet's best shields, designed to withstand planetary bombardments, were useless against these ancient behemoths. The Dranox ships turned to flee, but the human warships were faster. They moved with terrifying precision, blocking every escape route. There was no mercy in their movements, only cold, calculated destruction. On the planet's surface, Zell's team could do nothing but stare. The ground where the warships had been buried was now a cratered wasteland, the soil scorched by the energy surges. The very air felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. One of his soldiers whispered, "We have to get out of here." But Zell knew the truth. There was nowhere to go. Humanity had returned, not as refugees or survivors, but as a storm of vengeance. The Dranox Dominion had thought them extinct. They had celebrated their destruction. But now, in the cold darkness of space, the truth was clear. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. The Dranox fleet was in full retreat, but it didn't matter. They would never escape. The human warships moved like predators, cutting off every possible escape route. One by one, the mighty vessels of the Dranox Dominion were erased from existence, their shields crumbling like paper. What should have been a routine battle had turned into a massacre. The Titan's Wrath, leading the charge, unleashed another beam of energy, slicing through a Dranox battlecruiser. The ship didn't explode, it simply vanished, leaving nothing but empty space where it had once been. On the surface, Tel and his soldiers could only watch as their mighty empire was torn apart in seconds. His communicator crackled with distress signals, panicked screams of officers begging for reinforcements, begging for mercy. But there was no mercy here. The humans didn't respond. They didn't negotiate. They didn't even acknowledge the surrendering ships. They simply executed. Cell clenched his fists. This wasn't just a battle. This was a reckoning. Then something changed. The human warships stopped firing. For the first time since their awakening, the battlefield fell into silence. The remaining Dreadnought ships drifted, broken and powerless. Cell felt a strange mix of relief and terror. Why had they stopped? Had the humans spared them? Had they run out of power? But then, a deep mechanical voice echoed across every channel, broadcasting one chilling sentence to the entire galaxy. Human fleet, fully operational, awaiting next target. Cell's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about the Dreadnoughts. The humans weren't here for revenge against one empire. They were here for all of them. The silence was worse than the destruction. The Dreadnought's fleet, once the terror of the galaxy, now drifted lifelessly in space. Their strongest warships had been reduced to nothing but floating wreckage. Yet the human warships did not pursue the survivors. They remained still, their weapons quiet, their cold blue lights flickering in the void. It was as if they were waiting. But for what? On the surface, Captain Cell's breathing was ragged. His communicator buzzed with desperate voices. Dreadnought's commanders pleading for orders, for reinforcements, for salvation. But none would come. The mighty Dominion, which had ruled for centuries, had no answer to this ancient enemy. Cell turned to his remaining soldiers. Their faces were pale, their eyes filled with terror. For the first time in their lives, they understood what it meant to be prey. Then the human fleet moved. Their formation shifted, realigning into a perfect, terrifying pattern. A deep hum resonated through space, sending waves of energy rippling outward. The Titan's Wrath, the first warship to awaken, broadcast a single message. Its voice was calm, emotionless, final. Galactic-wide threat assessment, initiating countermeasures. Cell felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just about Dreadnoughts anymore. The humans weren't here for revenge against one empire. They were here to reclaim the galaxy. And no one, not a single species, was safe. The galaxy held its breath. The human warships, once buried and forgotten, now floated in perfect formation, their weapons charged but silent. Every surviving Dreadnought officer, every soldier, every being who had witnessed the instant obliteration of their fleet knew one thing. Humanity had not returned to negotiate. They had returned to conquer. Captain Cell could barely move. The words from the Titan's Wrath echoed in his mind. Galactic-wide threat assessment, initiating countermeasures. What did that mean? Were they preparing to strike again? Would they erase every Dreadnought's world, one by one? Would they turn their guns on other empires? The Dominion had always believed itself unstoppable, but now it was nothing before this sleeping giant. Then the human fleet turned, not toward the surviving Dreadnought ships, but outward, toward the distant stars. A new set of signals began to broadcast across the galaxy, their meaning clear and terrifying. They weren't just assessing the Dreadnoughts. They were scanning every major civilization, every military fleet, every empire. The Dreadnoughts had awakened something far worse than a lost enemy. They had awakened a force that would never stop. Cell felt a shiver run down his spine. The humans weren't just here to reclaim what was lost. They were here to take everything. The galaxy was no longer the same. The Dreadnought's dominion, once the mightiest force in the known universe, was broken in a matter of minutes. Their fleet lay in ruins, their commanders silent, their homeworlds left in stunned terror. But the humans, they did not celebrate. They did not even acknowledge their victory. They simply continued. The Titan's Wrath led the formation as the awakened warships began their march across the stars. Their scans expanded, reaching every corner of the galaxy, searching, evaluating every major empire, every military force, every hidden stronghold. Nothing was beyond their sight. The same cold, mechanical voice spoke once more, but this time it was broadcast to every species in existence. Threat assessment complete. Initiating Phase 2. Captain Sel fell to his knees. He had thought this was a battle. He had thought the Dranox had been at war. But this was never a war. This was an execution. The humans had not returned for revenge. They had returned to finish what they started. The galaxy had feared them once. Now it would learn to fear them again. Because the truth was clear. Humanity was back. And this time, they would never be buried again.